today, and it continues to show what we saw in May and, sorry, excuse me a moment. It continues to show what we saw in April and March and in the first half of May, and that is that, sorry, just having a little bit of a problem with the equipment. The new price data out today shows what we saw in March and April and the first half of May, which is basically no evidence of a major decline in house prices to date anyway. The figures out today are from SQM Research, which has indexes showing the previous week, the past month, and the past year on prices for the major capital cities. And looking at the rolling monthly figure up to today, the capital city average is a rise of just under 1% for houses for the month and a rise of 0.3% for apartments. In terms of house prices over the past month up to the present day, there have been rises in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide and Canberra, with Perth and Adelaide both up 1.6% for the past month. And there have been monthly decreases in Brisbane, Darwin and Hobart. In annual terms, every capital city except Darwin had house prices higher than this time last year. And the capital city average in annual terms is a rise of 10.8%, boosted by double-digit rises in Sydney, Melbourne and Hobart. While on the subject of house prices, lots of commentators want to have their say on what's going to happen with house prices, with predictions about whether they will fall or not, and if they do, by how much. Now, the people I call the usual suspects, the people who make doomsday forecasts year after year and are never right, have made some spectacular forecasts about prices collapsing. But the more serious predictors, like bank economists, are suggesting house prices might fall 9 or 10% in some locations before recovering. But there are plenty of commentators and analysts who are disputing that we will see even falls as moderate as that. For example, renowned radio mouth Alan Jones, who is also a Sky News presenter, has a loud opinion on most things, including this week on house prices. Now, Jones says that Sydney property prices have defied the COVID-19 doomsday predictions, and he refers to shonky reports that have been spooked by alarmists on the issue of house prices. Jones says that the government stimulus packages have limited the damage to property markets. And on the Sky News program, he discussed the current state of the housing market with the managing director of Ray White Real Estate, Dan White, who said that buyers are active in the market as they've got the opinion that now is a good time to invest in Australian real estate, and they're out doing that. Plenty of other people also expressing their views on what they expect to happen with house prices across Australia in the next, say, 6 to 12 months. And they include businessman and newspaper columnist Christopher Joy, who says that he is surrounded by what he calls the housing bears, those who expect major price decline. But he says he's confident that it just won't happen. He says, our base case is that Aussie house prices will flatline over the next few months, with the risk of a modest softening of prices of up to 5%. And thereafter, he says, we forecast that the 2019 to 2020 boom will reassert itself, with prices climbing by another 10 to 20% on the back of the 75 to 150 basis point reduction in mortgage rates over the past year. Now, one of the nation's leading real estate analysts, Simon Presley, who's the managing director of Propertyology, is predicting that house prices will grow over the next 2 years. And he says one of the key reasons for that prediction is that supply of properties for sale is very low. Presley says, as isolation measures relax, we could actually see a dynamic which resembles seagulls fighting over chips. A very low supply of dwellings for sale in large parts of Australia before COVID-19's arrival has reduced even further. On the demand side, Presley says the market remains favourable given the low mortgage rates, support for first home buyers and sensible credit policies. And he says savvy property investors understand that 3 to 6 months of disruption is minor in the overall scheme of property ownership. If anything, it creates a small window of opportunity. After all, they are investing in the essential commodity of shelter. Now, the Property Investment Professionals of Australia, that's PIPA for short, has released a new report, and it says that the property market is likely to be shielded by low interest rates, the ability to defer mortgage payments, which some people have done, and the previously strong market conditions that existed pre-coronavirus. The PIPA chairman, Peter Kaluzos, says, whenever there is a global financial shock, some commentators predict huge property price falls, which ultimately don't happen. And I know he's right about that because I've researched it thoroughly. Kaluzos also says during the global financial crisis in 2008, prices were forecast by some to fall by 30% or 40%, but in many locations they held their ground and even strengthened over the months and years afterwards. And I know he's right about that as well, because the official ABS data shows that Australian house prices rose on average 13.6% in 2009 and a further 6% in 2010. And Kaluzos says, while the coronavirus situation is somewhat different, given that it's a temporary public health emergency, I believe property prices may temporarily soften by 5% or maybe up to 10% at most, but rebound relatively quickly. Now, Fraser's Property Australia Residential General Manager Todd O'Dwyer says financial relief from the federal government is playing a big role in keeping Australian property markets solid. Also helping the market is the industry adapting quickly to the situation by introducing things like virtual tours, online inspections, video links, and electronic sales contracts. Another property investment expert says that prices are currently as low as they're likely to go in most major locations around the nation. In Synergy, Property Wealth Advisory Chief Property Investment Advisor Richard Shepherd says property prices are unlikely to fall much further due to the coronavirus crisis. And he says buyers who purchase in the next few months can benefit from market prices about 3% or 7% lower than they were, depending on the location. But he says that property prices don't appear to have fallen at all, and there are pockets of Brisbane and Melbourne that have remained robust during the crisis. And while Shepherd says he has seen evidence of prices falling 3 to 7% in some locations, I would repeat that the data out today from SQM Research shows very little evidence of decline in any of the major markets, which is also supported by recent figures from CoreLogic. Individual sales continue to achieve some good results, and here's an example from the weekend. In Glen Waverley in Melbourne, an auction on Saturday of a 4-bedroom house achieved a sale price of $1,317,000, which was $120,000 above the reserve price. Auction clearance rates in the major cities overall have continued to improve. According to the latest CoreLogic data, the week including the 17th of May, that's Sunday just a couple of days ago, saw 400 capital city homes scheduled for auction, with the preliminary results returning a 64% clearance rate. The previous week saw 480 homes scheduled for auction and a final clearance rate of 60%. A year ago, there were 930 homes taken to auction and a 55% clearance rate. So the clearance rate last week, 64%, compares very favourably with the same time last year, which was 55%. But as CoreLogic says, it's important to interpret clearance rates with caution, given that auction volumes remain substantially lower than usual at the moment. Sydney returned a preliminary clearance rate of 73% last year, which is very strong at any time. And CoreLogic says that this suggests the relaxation in social distancing policies specific to housing are having an immediate and positive impact on house auctions, although the number of auctions remains well down on last year. So turning to infrastructure announcements, there's lots of major projects being announced or advanced, including this week a number of hotel developments in different parts of the country. In Adelaide, early works have begun on the expansion of the Lyell McEwen Hospital's emergency department and the development of a new mental health short stay unit. This $60 million project will almost double the hospital's emergency department capacity and is part of the state government's, the South Australian state government's $1 billion hospital infrastructure investment program. In Sydney, buildings at the Royal North Shore Hospital will be bulldozed and redeveloped into 500 high-rise units for frontline workers, a Medi hotel and a new school, amongst other things. The state government has released plans to redevelop a 2.3 hectare block of land at the Royal North Shore Hospital, and a concept video of the proposal shows the project will include a main residential tower, a Medi hotel, shops, offices, hospital-related services, and a new school. Property New South Wales says 75% of the units will be allocated to key workers, including nurses and paramedics, while the hotel will assist in accommodating patients, carers, and visiting clinicians. The plans are the latest major development mooted for the St Leonard's Town Centre, which include a number of other high-rise apartment towers. And still on the subject of medical infrastructure, in the north of Brisbane, work will start soon on the $395 million Caboolture Hospital redevelopment, which will increase bed numbers about 50% and add a new car park. Lendlease has been appointed as managing contractor for the upgrade, which will result in bed numbers rising by 130 to 390 beds. And parking spaces will also increase by more than 500 to about 1,600. The project will create up to 600 jobs for the region, with 350 workers on site each day during peak construction periods. And in regional New South Wales, the first stage of a $60 million redevelopment of the Inverell District Hospital will be ready for service soon. The new acute services building includes a new emergency department, a 38-bed inpatient unit, maternity and birthing facilities, and other general services. And that's my good news bulletin for today. I'll do another broadcast in the next day or so. Bye for now.